They do the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Blunt Kelly get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of chest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor pulls the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity where they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Steampunk Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hello, welcome to the Punch Show. Hope you had a fantastic weekend, and hope you have an even better short week before, depending on where you live, you may or may not be eating turkey in 4 days. As for me, mine is thawing in the refrigerator. I've been experimenting with what do they call it? Spatchcocking. I spatchcocked a couple of chickens. Definitely a better way to prepare a bird. So this year I'm going to spatchcock my turkey, which will be a first. Hopefully it'll come out right. The thing I was worried about was the stuffing, but then I was doing some research and apparently you can rest it on top of the stuffing. And so I think I'm going to do it that way. I think it'll actually come out better, both the turkey and the stuffing. So anyway, I'll show some pictures of it and let you know if it worked out okay. But hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving if that's what you do. And if you're Native American, I apologize if that I'm offending you by talking about this. I know some Native Americans that like really hate it when they get told Happy Thanksgiving or whatever, and I can understand why. But anyway, today I want to start by just talking about a couple of things that are in the news. Won't spend a lot of time on it, but my main objective today is I want to go through and really address this whole what constitutes an unlawful order and my thoughts on the Democrats sharing the video and all of that stuff. But I just want to touch on a couple of lightning rods here. And there's this Ukraine peace agreement, which is anything but an agreement because it's not an agreement until both sides agree. Otherwise, it's just like a proposal. And like the so-called in Gaza, they keep talking about that like it's some sort of agreement or some kind of peace plan that's already been agreed to, which the only thing the Gazans have agreed on is the first part, and that's not even being done yet. And since it was just looked it up here, there have been 875 people injured from Israeli strikes. Another out of those, there are 571 that have, 342 have died, and 67 of those were children. So this is my issue with the media and the way they cover these things is they give Trump more credit than he deserves. He sat down with the bully and talked about the terms of surrender of the bully victim. And then the bully said, okay, I get everything I want. And Trump says, that's great. We can do that. And then he goes and he tells the bully kid, this is what you have, these are the terms of surrender. So the The whole thing is patently ridiculous to call this a peace agreement because Gaza hasn't agreed to it and never will. Gaza's not going to agree to let Trump sit on the board that governs Gaza. Like, seriously, that has as much chance of working as sticking your ice cream in the oven and putting it on broil to keep it frozen. Like, there's just no way that is going to actually happen. Hi, Benny. Eric says free Palestine and Ireland. And yeah, I agree. And then what is your favorite game? I don't even know. Do you like the Green Bay Packers? I do not like the Green Bay Packers. I used to be a Chicago Bears fan, but I'm kind of like all teams. Anyway, we're kind of getting off topic here. The Ukraine peace agreement is not an agreement. And, like even somebody went through and they looked at the language of it and they were like, this sounds more like translated idioms than it does English. And so turns out Russia literally wrote the peace agreement. And now, the Trump administration wants to deny it and everything. But let's just not call it a peace agreement until Ukraine agrees, like put the agree back in agreement. Like it's not that hard. It's kind of stupid. We're making too much of this before it's something. Okay. Then I wanted to touch on this too. There's a lot of people that are mad about Mamdani meeting with Trump, but I think more of it is people are upset that when Kamala Harris met with Elizabeth Cheney, it was all, you're reaching across the aisle, you're destroying everything, and like you're just gonna be like MAGA, you're Republicans now, and now Mamdani meets with Trump, and everybody's like, and the left is like, talking about how great it was, and so people are saying, like there's this double standard. I don't even want to get into that whole conversation. I didn't want to get into it with Kamala Harris, and I don't want to get into it with Mamdani. I voted for Harris. I would vote for Mamdani if I could. I think it's different. And I think it's comparing apples and oranges. One is asking for an endorsement in a campaign against Trump, and the other one is an elected mayor working with Trump to govern the largest city in the country. So there has to be some kind of relationship there. It's not like either Harris or Mamdani changed their position to match Trump's or Cheney's. So I think it's just a lot of the left just loves to fight with itself. And I really wish we would stop. Instead of finding silly things to bicker over, how about we just agree that Trump's the enemy? So we got, okay, gee, anyway, there's a weird conversation going on in my chat. So, yes, well, Trump is sort of fighting with Marjorie. I should have, her whole thing, that's pretty funny. Anyway, I will say this, like her whole thing with, like I would say people are like, she's changed her politics. She rode in on the QAnon horse, right? Like to her, the whole genesis of everything was protecting the kids from the pedos. And so now with Epstein, she's still protecting the kids from the pedos. I can see why that would be a major issue with her. And if we're being honest, if you watch the press conference with the Epstein survivors and her, they, many of them thanked her personally for her work, and it was clearly not just a political pat on the back. Like she had genuinely been there with them through the entire fight. So I think sometimes we label people as all good or all bad, which is what we're doing with Harris and Mamdani too. They do one bad thing and all of a sudden they're all corrupted. Well, and Green can do one good thing, and that doesn't mean that I'm ready to endorse her for president or anything. I can acknowledge that helping the Epstein victims was a good thing without like getting on board with the rest of her whole nut train. Like I'm not like ready to go, okay, maybe there are there are space lasers. Like there's, but I can say, she helped people in need, and that's a good thing. So I would take the glasses off, but I wouldn't be able to read them. These were reading glasses. So anyway, and I really don't think I look like Epstein, but okay. Trump is not the best, but hey, he's better than Biden. That's an opinion. So anyway, this is so that I just wanted to get into a couple of introductory things there, and really just the whole Mamdani thing. Just stop it. It's silly. It's silly to get all worked up over that stuff. Okay, so oh man, got the red line there. Oh well. So the next thing I want to do, I'm going to go through this PowerPoint presentation. If you've watched the show before, and I usually have the dashboards that I show, I'm trying something different that I hope will work out better. But if you watched the show before, can you let me know what you think? If you like the old with the dashboards better or the PowerPoint better? How do I? Where did you go? There you go. That's what I'll do. Okay. And then I got to turn off this banner and put on this banner. To obey or not to obey? That is the question. So there's this big controversy now. The Democrats put out a video that said, reminded members of the military that you don't have to obey an unlawful order. And the Republican response was like, what unlawful orders? Oh, you can't even name an order. You didn't even name an order. And I think that there's this weird sort of thing, like somehow the Democrats were bad because they said this and didn't specify any specific unlawful orders to not obey. But all they said was unlawful orders. So they're like really, really pedantic about what the Democrats said when it comes to Trump, but just generalizing when it comes to what they said about Trump from, like whether or not what they said is legal. When what they said is that, don't obey unlawful orders, which is 100% legal and true. But I'm going to go into the background of why the military says you can't obey unlawful orders. Go through a little bit of case history about where that happened, what that has meant for people that both did and didn't obey unlawful orders. We'll talk a little bit about Nuremberg, and we'll talk about My Lai and how that all played out. We'll talk about what are the unlawful orders that are in question here, which, by the way, is the Caribbean, the strikes in the Caribbean, and a potential attack on Venezuela. We'll talk about what constitutes an unlawful order or not obeying. Is it just, oh, well, I think that's illegal versus, that is illegal. So we'll go through all those details and have a conversation. I'll try and present it as fairly and evenly as possible. But I also hope to answer the actual question, which is whether or not this is what's being done. Are they being given unlawful orders? And I think a lot of the conversation has been the wrong conversation to have about this, because it's so much about why are we, you're making, when you say you can't follow an unlawful order, you're making them decide whether or not the order is lawful or not. And I would say, no, I am not doing that. And the Democrats aren't doing that with this video. The people that are doing that are the ones that are giving unlawful orders. So how about we look at whether the orders are lawful or not, and then blame the people that are giving the orders instead of just making it like, oh, the orders were given, therefore you must follow them whether they're legal or not, because they wouldn't be. It's, even some people seem to have this notion that the mere fact that they've been given makes them legal because they were given by the president. And so much history to uncover and to justify what is ethical and what is not. And I don't know if this was facetious or not. I will say this is a nuanced conversation. And there is some things that are ethical and some things that are not. And it requires nuance, and it requires history, and it requires actually trying to understand. But there are some principles that are pretty clean. And there's a pretty big difference, for instance, between a drug smuggler and an actual terrorist. And we'll cover that. Democrats are bad. Okay. I don't know if that was serious or. Isn't that treason? No, it's actually not treason. And we'll get in. Well, actually, that'll be covered. And yes, I do care to explain. Please stick around. That's the whole point of the next hour, is to explain exactly why. This is a nuanced conversation. That's why I'm covering all the nuance. And so hopefully I can help explain at least my understanding and my belief concerning this. So, all right, let's dive into this slide deck that I made and have this discussion. So first, let's just talk about what's going on with the strikes in the Caribbean. All right, they started on September 2nd, 2025. Since then, there's been 21 strikes. 83 people have been killed, 2 have survived. 11 have been in the Caribbean, and 11, well, I guess we're up to 22 in the East Pacific. The weapons we've used are an MQ-9 Reaper drones, AC-130J gunships, and Hellfire missiles. And the administration's justification is counter narcotics against narco terrorist claims. All right, so we're going to get into that in more detail later, and we'll cover the whole, like, what does counterterrorism mean and whether or not that justifies what's going on. But this is just the overview, right? So we won't get into all the details right now. All right. So what are the legal concerns with the strikes in the Caribbean? Okay. The first thing is there's something called the War Powers Resolution, which questions whether Trump complied. So the War Powers Resolution says within 60 days you have to notify Congress and get approval from Congress. The initial memos were written at some time in July. They've been planning this since July, and they still have not gone to Congress to get congressional approval. There was a petition that was that failed, was voted down in the Senate 51-48 to stop the drone strikes, but that's not the same thing as approving them via a war power resolution, because that would entail like basically declaring war on who? The administration in this classified memo has designated certain terrorist groups as being narco-terrorist organizations, but we don't know what those terrorist organizations even are. And there's also a lot of stretching on what narco-terrorism means. And so they would have to actually have the discussion in Congress. which is why they haven't filed. Even though, whether you're going by the July memo as the start date or even the September 2nd date when they first struck it, this is a conflict according to the War Powers Resolution. Donald Trump should have been to Congress, or his administration. Somebody should have been there explaining what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it, and Congress should have had to vote on it. They've had more than 60 days now, and of course, there was the shutdown. I don't think that gives them like a pass, and there's no discussion about even having it. So where is the constitutional authority for what Trump is doing is a big question. That's a legal concern, a legitimate legal concern. Secondly, there's the lack of evidence. This idea that they're a narco-terrorist group, where's the evidence that they are? Should there be evidence? Do we really want just the president to be able to designate any group it wants as a terrorist organization and then it becomes magically a terrorist organization? Terrorism has actual meaning, both in parlance and in legal parlance. And the idea of terrorism is that you're using terror to affect political change. Right? Now, drug cartels are bad. This is not, oh, you're either for or against drug cartels. Don't force that false dichotomy on us. They just aren't terrorist organizations because they're not politically motivated. Do you know what the politics of, one of their, the Tren de Aragua or whatever it's called? Do you know their politics? Who did they vote for? Who did they support? Are they socialist? Are they Republican? Are they conservative? Are they for, like, who are they? Are they like who are they for? Who's their leader? Their political leader. Who do they vote for? You don't know their politics. We don't know their politics. They probably don't even have any politics, much less the politics being their entire motivation for everything. Narco terrorists have traditionally meant one of two things. They're either actual terrorist organizations that fund their activities with narcotics, like, going back to I-Contra thing, that's how the term got invented. Or, like with Pablo Escobar, using terrorism to effect government change to keep governments friendly to narcotic trafficking in power. So both are political in nature and have a narcotic element. Like, there's elements of narcotics and there's elements of terrorism and political change. There is no element of political change with Tren de Aragua. So how are they narco terrorists? Like, that's a legitimate question, right? And there's no evidence. There should be some evidence that they are, that's been presented. Instead, they're not even telling us who these narco terrorist groups are, much less what makes them terrorists. And there's also, like, this whole point, there's international laws that are being violated. We'll get into it in a bit, but the refusal to follow unlawful orders doesn't just apply to domestic law. It also applies to international law. And based on our own international agreement, we identify cartels as criminal organizations, not military organizations. So we can't declare war on them because they're not a military group. They're not even a non-state actor. They're just a criminal organization. That's what they're defined as. And they have, when you're dealing with criminal organizations, there's a series of international laws that tell you what and how you can deal with that. They still have a right to due process, for instance. And when you blow up a ship on the high seas, you're killing civilians, even if they are smugglers, which they may or may not be. But even if they are, it's still a violation of international law to blow these ships up. Even if you call them narco terrorists, it's still a violation of international law because the international community does not recognize them as terrorists. The international community, by written agreement, which we have co-signed on, have called them a criminal organization, not a terrorist organization. And then officials acknowledge they don't know the identities of the people on the vessels before attacking. And there's like two kinds of ways to justify attack. One is like the actual person and you're attacking that person. The other one is like an association attack. Like, so there's like one idea would be the American guy that the Republicans like to get all upset about, like he actually carried out terrorist attacks, actually helped plan a terrorist attacks. He was planning a terrorist attack. He was on a list of known terrorists that we were going to kill if we found out where they were, and then we killed him. You can talk about the whole citizenship thing, and that's a whole other conversation. But he was a terrorist. I mean, he was an actual terrorist that wanted to kill Americans. And that was a targeted attack. It was targeting that one person versus there's a terrorist camp and there's enough people that we know that are terrorists there. There might be some other people there too that we don't know are terrorists, but there's enough terrorists there that we can assume that everybody there is a terrorist. And that has legal ambiguity. And it happened under Obama. I'm not going to say it didn't. There was some ethical questions, even within the Obama administration, about whether or not they should do that. They tightened it up to where the standard became you had to be like near certain that everybody there was a terrorist. Like he did tighten up the standards, but before he tightened up the standards, there were some, people that were just, guilt by association. Same thing happened under Bush. And one thing I think that people forget and don't really rationalize with a lot of this stuff is that drones are a fairly new innovation, right? Like we didn't have drones in World War II. We didn't have drones in Korea. We didn't have drones in Vietnam. The Gulf War was the first war where we were dealing with drones, and the War on Terror is the first time we were really dealing with drones. There's some advantages to drone strikes. Like we don't have to send in people, which means we don't have to risk military lives. And we kill fewer civilians. While there were civilians killed, we kill a lot fewer civilians using drones than we would with a full-scale boots-on-the-ground invasion. So there is a whole other discussion that, if you were trying to be honest about it, you just have to acknowledge it's not that simple. But having said all of that, there was a clear, these were terrorists that they were talking about. These were not drug smugglers. And that's a big difference, both ethically and legally. All right. So do I agree that something needs to be done about drugs coming in? Well, I think something is being done, but that's like a digression. I am not talking about like whether or not we should have drugs. I feel like this is a straw man argument or a red herring. Yes, we should stop drugs. I think drug overdoses are bad. I think that we can do a lot of things. Do I think this is the way to stop drugs coming in? I do not. I don't think that bombing a few boats in the Caribbean is going to stop all the drug trafficking into the United States. Most of the drugs trafficked in the United States aren't even coming in over the ocean. So I don't think that this is going to stop it. And that's one of the reasons I feel like this question isn't honest, because it assumes that bombing these boats will stop drugs coming in. So I hope that answers your question. Like, I do want to stop drugs. I just don't think that this is the way to do it. All right. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the Democrats video, I was going to present the video, but ended up deciding everybody's probably already seen it. But the Democrats made a video saying you should refuse illegal orders. 6 Democratic lawmakers with military intelligence background, senators Slotkin and Kelly, Representatives Crow, Deluzio, Goldbar, Goodlander, and Houlihan. Basically, their message was you can refuse illegal orders. You must refuse illegal orders. Oath to Constitution. Our oath is to the Constitution, not to any leader, and threats to the Constitution from right here at home. And none of that is treasonous. Like, I was in the military. I was taught in the military in basic training. We had like 3 or 4 days, like not the whole days, but we'd have like classes for like 2 hours a day. And, it was like 6 weeks. And so, but like 3 or 4 of the days, I don't remember exactly how many days, but there were several days where we went over specifically this exact thing, that you are required to refuse to follow unlawful orders. And the Democrats who gave this video, that's all they did, is to just reminded the military members, you're required to not follow, to refuse to follow unlawful orders. So then Trump called this sedition. He called the lawmakers traitors. He said it's punishable by death. And he demanded they be locked up. And these caps here are like, he literally said it in caps. So I kept the quote the same. Like, this is not treason. It is not, if it is treasonous to tell somebody in the military that they can't follow an unlawful order, then every single training instructor in every single branch of the military should be locked up and tried for treason. Because every single person that goes through basic training or boot camp or, whatever, different services sometimes call them different. I don't know what the Navy calls it. But in the Air Force, we call it basic training. Every single person that goes through training learns this exact thing. And we learned the history and we talked about it. And even one of the things I remember so clearly, because I was like, wow, even if the president of the United States were to give you a personal order to carry out an unlawful order, you would be breaking the law if you did it. So that Donald Trump has said he's the one that gave the orders. People have defended that, saying, well, like, he gave the order, how can it be unlawful? If the president can't give this order, who can? Nobody can. That's the whole point. It's an unlawful order. Nobody can give you an unlawful order and then act like you need to follow it. Trump has not only said you have to follow it, he's saying if you don't follow it, you're committing treason. And if you tell somebody they don't have to follow it, you're committing treason. When we took that oath, our oath was to the Constitution. It was not to any man. So what is the legal framework? It comes from UCM Article 92. That's the UCMJ, is the Uniform Code of Military Justice. This is like everything, this is like the law book for the military and code. It tells you everything from when to obey an unlawful order to how long your tie should be. Like, when you're dressed in your dress blues, it should be like within a half an inch of the top of your buckle to the bottom of your buckle. Like, that's the range the bottom of your tie can be. Like, it goes into that kind of specificity. It tells you how to iron your dress jacket. But it also tells you when to obey and when to not obey an order. So what does it say about that? It says that the orders must comply with the Constitution. So if you were told to conduct in military activity or police activity, that would be against the Constitution. You could not do that. It has to comply with U.S. federal law, and it has to comply with international law, and it must have a valid military purpose. So I want to point out especially to this part about it has to comply with international law, because all the justifications that Trump gives and the Trump administration give just affect domestic law. Like, you can say they're narco terrorist groups and blah, 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 and then use that as to shoehorn in. That's why there's an armed conflict, and then the armed conflict makes them enemy combatants. And then because they're enemy combatants, they're no longer civilians. And since they're no longer civilians, now we can kill them on the open high seas without due process. Like, this tortured logic that they have doesn't apply to international law, because according to the international community, it's still illegal. And to violate international law is to go against your oath. It's to obey an unlawful order. Even if you want to say that it's legal domestically because Trump said so, it's still against international law. These orders do violate the Constitution. They require commission of crimes. These are what unlawful orders are. They're those that violate the Constitution, require commission of crimes. They violate the Geneva Conventions, and they clearly violate human rights. Due process is a basic human right, right? So even if you're a drug smuggler, you get due process. You can't just have cops, for instance, going around shooting suspected drug smugglers. Like, they arrest them and they bring them to court and they charge them, and then they get convicted or they get acquitted. Right now, what's happening is the basic human right, the most fundamental basic human right of due process is being violated because Trump said so. These are unlawful orders. There's no ambiguity here. This is not a matter of opinion. This is not just some liberal hot take. This is an actual fact. Killing drug smugglers without due process is a violation of international law. And the other thing that's important to mention here is that orders are presumed lawful. There's not this, oh, should I follow it or not follow it? There's not these tortured military people that are sitting there going, oh, I don't know if I should follow it or not. Is this legal or not? For instance, when some people were saying that they shouldn't follow the orders to go to DC or to, there's nothing manifestly unlawful about that order. There may be illegal things in terms of Trump sending the troops to DC, but in terms of reporting for duty, and you're not actually being told to do anything unlawful. So that's a kind of thing where you can file it through your legal channels and hope for the best. But that's not refusing to follow an unlawful order. And that can get you in a boatload of trouble. You can be considered AWOL. You can be considered a deserter. You can have your whole life destroyed. That is not what is being talked about here. When you're told to kill a civilian, that's manifestly unlawful. All right. I hope I made that clear. All right. So just checking for, hey, Starboy the Knight. What if they were from, oh, this guy. What if they were from English from, I bet you I was actually 4.5 years. I did one term and I extended so I could go to Italy. That's not a basic human right. No, other countries and people have rights. Like, we are not the only group country in the world that has rights. This is like such a weird thing. It's like, have you ever been outside the country? Um, what if they were from England? They're not, so I don't understand why that question is there. Okay, anyway, let's go into um, so what is a manifestly unlawful order? The standard is that orders that are clearly illegal on their face, any soldier would immediately recognize them as wrong without legal analysis. Kill this civilian, this unarmed civilian, kill them. You know that's illegal, right? Like, there's not a gray area there. But that is what they are being told to do. They are being told to murder civilians. Classic examples: targeting civilians. Like I just said, torturing or waterboarding. If you're told to torture somebody, you can say no, because torturing is against the law. Executing prisoners or falsifying documents. All those things are manifestly illegal. You can, like, right away on the face, there's not like, you don't need a lawyer to sit there and figure out the nuances of the legal discussion here. Like the whether what the Posse Act, the something or other Posse Act, that whether and the Supreme Court can't even agree on whether or not that is legal or not. Like, that is not the kind of thing we're talking about. Whether or not you can be told to murder somebody is not. And I was thinking of it this way. This is like, remember, I think, what do they call it? Ad ridiculum, something like that, where you draw a ridiculous comparison, so ridiculous that nobody would like try and take it seriously. That what if Donald Trump told SEAL Team 6 to take out his political opponent? Would that be legal? And they took it seriously. They're like, yeah. And, yeah, that would be an official act. And if Congress didn't impeach him, then he couldn't be prosecuted for it. Like, what kind of insane person thinks that way? But now it's like he's like, challenge accepted. I can go out and order the military to kill civilians now. And now he's trying to make it, not only is it legal for him to do it, it's illegal for anybody to tell the people that are doing the killing that they can't do it. How insane is that? So this is an actual thing that happened. I know we talk a lot about Nuremberg, but I want to bring in an actual American history event, because I want to make sure that you understand this applies to American soldiers. So what happened in Viet Cong, what happened in Vietnam is some soldiers went to this town that they called My Lai, and they were told that it was filled with Viet Cong. They didn't find any Viet Cong there, but they killed everybody they found there. Like almost the entire town. They killed over 500 people. They raped the women. They burned the houses down. They were killing children. There was the one guy, the major, I think his name was Collar, something like that. Anyway, he kid was moving and he emptied his pistol into them, just like Nazis would or something. It was just grotesque. So they, back at home, they didn't get into all the details. It was just, oh, this was a great military victory. Of the people that did it, one person was charged with a crime. Killed 500 people. And the one person was charged with a crime. But then there was somebody else. And this is really gets to the heart of what I want to talk about, is that Hugh Thompson Jr. was a helicopter pilot. And he was in the area and he heard gunfire or whatever and realized something was going on. He radioed in. And they told him, okay, it's over here. So he went to go see if he could help. And then he realized these U.S. soldiers were killing civilians. So he kept trying to land his helicopter and stop it. Finally, he literally landed his flight or his copter between the civilians and the soldiers, had his gunners point their guns at the U.S. military and warned them that if they kept firing, they were going to be fired on. And that's what finally ended it. He went and personally carried like 10 of the wounded children into the hospital to take them to get medical care. And then he reported the massacre up the line. And his thanks for doing this was he got his career wrecked. He got hauled in for a hearing before Congress. He was called a traitor. He got death threats for years. He suffered from PTSD, became an alcoholic. He lost his wife. He lost his job. He was ostracized by the military. His whole life was destroyed because he did the right thing. So when you talk about, like, don't follow unlawful orders, realize there are consequences for doing that. Nobody's going to do this lightly. The first reaction of the military, especially under this administration, is going to be to punish anybody that does. So the thing we should be talking about is not whether or not the military should be following unlawful orders, but why the bleep are they being given them? Why do we have to create Hugh Thompsons? Why can't we just say, stop giving unlawful orders? Imagine you just join the military to serve your country. You become a drone pilot. You're an enlisted dude. You're 24 years old. And you're either told, either murder this person or have the rest of your life destroyed. Nobody needs to be making that decision at 24 or 34 or 44. Get more into the process by which this decision came. But I really want people to stop and think, why are we putting soldiers in this position in the first place, or airmen or seamen? Why are we doing it? So the soldier who was doing this, his name was William Calley. He's the one that ordered the execution of the civilians. He personally confessed to killing like a couple of dozen of them. He said he was following his superior's orders, but his superior was acquitted at a trial. He got convicted of 22 counts of murder. And then Richard Nixon pardoned him, or commuted his sentence. Made him serve out a 3-year sentence in house arrest, and his house had a swimming pool. So he got this incredibly light sentence for 3 years. Then after it was over, he was lauded as a hero. He lived about freely. It didn't destroy the rest of his life. It destroyed the rest of Hugh Thompson's life. The guy who followed the unlawful orders, barely anything happened. The guy who didn't had his life destroyed. So bear in mind, this is not an easy thing for a soldier to do. This idea that you're sitting there making them question every order, or that this video means they're going to be questioning every order, that's a bunch of crap. Okay. So here we go. Yeah. Hugh Thompson, vilified as a traitor. Congress tried to persecute him. He received death threats for years. His career was like wrecked. His marriage was wrecked. And then 30 years later, they finally sorry. This next part is kind of emotional. After he received recognition for what he did, he went back to My Life, and there was a survivor there who asked him, "Why didn't you bring the other man so we could forgive him?" And he's just like, "I just don't have it in me to do that." Sorry to get emotional. But when we're asking military members to not follow unlawful orders, this is not a light thing that we're asking. You're asking them to sacrifice a lot. And so instead of just talking about whether or not they should follow the orders, can we please talk about why are these orders even being given? That's the tragedy. It shouldn't be about whether or not the orders should be followed. It's whether or not the orders should be given. William Cowley had a nice life. Hugh Thompson did not. So are the Caribbean strikes manifestly unlawful? So I'm going to go into this. So the arguments that say they are unlawful are, first, there's legal force without a proper legal. Oh, wait, let me. So we've got some comments here. Wrong question. I don't know what was the wrong question. Most of them haven't. Most of the cult members have an allergic reaction when they hear research, library, higher education. Trump speaks on a third grade level. It's primarily why they can relate. Sir, I salute you for your efforts, but unfortunately, the Kool-Aid they've been drinking is highly addictive. Lost causes. Best bet is to sit back and let the policies they want to destroy them. Yeah, the thing is it's not just going to destroy them. It's going to destroy, the country. It's not like only they suffer the consequences. All right, so the arguments for the Caribbean strikes being unlawful is that there's not a proper legal basis. There's no verification for the targets identified. They don't even know who the targets are. They don't even know who these people are. They just know that they're driving a certain kind of boat. They'll say, "Oh, well, they don't, do you think they know how to, identify a drug boat?" They know how that drug boats have certain characteristics, but one of those characteristics is that they mimic fishing boats so that they can hide. And so, like, some of these boats could very well be fishing boats. To put it into perspective, 75, I think last year, 77% of the boats they pulled over and suspected of drug smuggling, they actually found drugs on. And that was the highest year on record, the highest percent on record. So at best, they're getting like 75%. So out of 21 boats, if you say each boat, there's a 75% chance they're right. To get 21 boats in a row, the chances are 99.57% of doing that, which means that there is a near certainty that at least one of these boats was not a smuggling boat. And it's probably more like 5 or 6 of them. Which, well, 15 of them were. Well, That's the other issue, is whether they were or not is moot, since either way it's illegal. And the reason it's illegal, one of the reasons, is that they might not be. And be winch 6. If there were 6 boats that there weren't any drugs on, winch 6. So there's no legal question here. Like I said, even if you want to obfuscate all you want with the domestic laws, it's still against international law. And the code is you can't follow an unlawful order that's against international law. So here's the arguments. And this is where I want to point out how ludicrous the argument is that they're lawful. There's a DOJ Office of Legal Counsel memo that's arguing for it. All right. And that gives the legal justification for it. But when you start peeling back that, it's because there's an armed conflict status that's claimed, right? We have an armed conflict. But why do we have an armed conflict? Because it's in the secret memo. And why? Who declared it? Trump did. So Trump said we have an armed conflict, therefore we have an armed conflict, and therefore it's okay to kill these people. Whether or not we have an armed conflict has not been resolved. Trump said we have an armed conflict, right? The terrorist organization designations, right? Oh, they're narco-terrorist groups. Why are they called a narco-terrorist group? Because Marco Rubio said they're a narco-terrorist group. And why did Marco Rubio say they're a narco-terrorist group? Because Donald Trump wanted him to declare it a narco-terrorist group. They're not a terrorist group. You can call a potato a cabbage, but it's still a potato. The actual reality of what the thing is does not get changed if you call it something else. A potato does not become a cabbage when you call it a cabbage. It remains a potato. You just look like an idiot for calling it a cabbage. A cartel does not become a terrorist group because you called it a terrorist group. It remains a cartel. You just look like an idiot that doesn't know the difference between a cartel and a terrorist group. But all of this is the underlying basis for which people are being murdered on the high seas. And so it really is, honestly, it distills down to we can kill people if the president says so. We could target Boy Scouts in Ireland by just designating International Boy Scouts a terrorist organization. It doesn't have to be a terrorist organization. All we have to do is designate it a terrorist organization. Then after we declare International Boy Scouts a terrorist organization, we can say, oh, there's an armed conflict. And then because have this armed conflict with a terrorist organization, we can go out and start killing people. Do you see the problem? Like, you can't just say Trump said so. That's not a sound legal argument. And then it says, they say, oh, the orders came from the president himself. That's, again, we were taught, if the president gives you an order that is unlawful, when I was in the military, I was specifically told this exact thing. If the president gives you an unlawful order, you are required to not follow it. And there is a presumption of lawfulness that applies, but that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to say, murdering civilians is bad. I'm not going to do it. If there's any doubt, you should follow the order. But when it comes to murdering people on the high sea, there shouldn't be any doubt. You very much know that it's illegal. So the UN, and again, I really want to focus on the international side of this because it bypasses all that weirdo, like Trump said it's okay, so it's okay stuff. because you can't follow an order that violates international law, regardless of whether or not you think that domestic law applies. Can you imagine if like Hitler had just said, this is legal according to German law to gas, Jews? Would that make it okay? Would that make it legal? Well, it was legal in Germany. Now, they didn't give a crap about that in the Nuremberg trials, violated international laws. So, whether you make something legal through these pseudo announcements and secrets does not make it okay legally. It doesn't make it okay according to international law. So, according to the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, like the foremost expert in the world on international rights, Volker Turek must halt strikes to prevent extrajudicial killing. Which extrajudicial killings is just another way of saying murder. And again, since they were planning these before they started happening, and remember, they planned it in July. So these aren't just murders, these are premeditated murders. These strikes violate international human rights law and occur outside the context of armed conflict. This is literally something that is in the UCMJ, that you cannot follow orders that violate human rights laws, international human rights laws. By definition, this is an illegal order. According to the UCMJ, this is an illegal order. You can't just change what a legal order means. You can't just change what the word terrorism means. The Geneva Conventions, service members criminally responsible if the subordinate knew or should have known the act was unlawful. UN experts, military action against sovereign state represents graver breach of the UN Charter. And then the Zone of Peace Declaration from 2014. Latin American countries were designated region as Zone of Peace. Leaders say U.S. deployment threatens self-determination. And I think that's the other thing that we need to start considering. It's not just the strikes. It's like, what follows next? What if the president of the United States says we need to invade Venezuela or Argentina or whichever? I always get those two mixed up for some reason. Anyway, if he says to invade this country to go after the cartels, does that become legal? Because we're at war with some cartel that we don't even know which one we're looking for or who's in it, or what their politics are. And so this is what the soldiers that are currently serving are facing. They can't even consult military lawyers on this, because military lawyers are absent from the briefing because they don't want the military lawyers telling the soldiers what the law is, because they don't want the soldiers to know what the law is. They've fired. It says top uniformed lawyers fired this year. They fired like 2 lawyers. The top guy from I can't remember what command was, but anyway, the 2 top lawyers that deal with this sort of thing both said it was illegal, and so they got canned. Yes, what's your legal opinion? Well, this is my legal opinion, and this is why. You're fired. Next guy. So guy number 3, right? Yeah, what do you want me to say? This is not like hard math, right? When you start seeing everybody fired that disagrees with Trump, you're only going to have people that agree with Trump left, or sycophants who are just saying they agree with Trump so they can keep their jobs. Even Hegseth, just think about this. Pete Hegseth called the lawyers This is a quote. He called them roadblocks to orders. He fired them because they were saying these orders were illegal. So you're just looking for a rubber stamp, not actual whether it was legal or not. The two people that were most equipped to determine whether it was legal or not were saying, no, this is illegal. There's been no intelligence community briefings. There's been no tactical operators. So the tactical operators, the people that are actually pulling the trigger on these, they don't know all this stuff. They don't know this stuff is going on. They don't know that, okay, 2 lawyers were fired because they said this was illegal. Do you think that it might be more manifestly illegal to them? Do you think that they might question it more before they murdered people and had to live with that on their conscience for the rest of their lives? You might not know this. I didn't know this until I started researching it. PTSD among drone operators is almost as high as with actual battlefield veterans, because it's not just the threat of being killed, it's the actual act of killing that traumatizes people. And they actually have to kill these people. But when you're killing innocent or combatants, when you're killing actual combatants, it's one thing. When you're killing innocent people, it's another. And I'd like to highlight one other thing. Civilians are civilians. I don't care if they're drug smugglers or if they're just fishermen. We make too much point about this debating whether or not there's drug smugglers or fishermen. Either way, it's illegal. If they're drug smugglers, I say wait until they get close, board their boats, arrest them, confiscate their drugs, send them to prison, get them to flip, and go after their higher ups. Like, actually bust the operation open. Give them due process. Give them a trial. Follow the law. Why is that so hard? And if there aren't any drugs there, then you just saved yourself and some poor kid from murdering innocent people. So what are service members supposed to do if they, suspect they're being given an allowance for it? They're supposed to seek advice from legal counsel, but their legal counsel isn't being made available. They can question through appropriate channels, but the appropriate channels aren't being given the information. They can document concerns, but give them to who? Report to Inspector General if needed. The Inspector Generals are all getting fired. So then they can act on moral convictions when clarity exists. And I don't know what happens there. I don't, there were some rumors that a couple of drone operators had been, removed, but then, apparently that's having trouble being validated. There was a survey from June. 80% of active duty service troops understood they have a duty to disobey unlawful orders. And the most common response of what is an unlawful order? Refusing to harm civilians, which I think blowing them up counts as refusing to harm civilians. And again, they're a drug smuggler or not, they're still civilians. The only thing that makes them combatants is Donald Trump said so. Donald Trump said that they're narcotics, they're narco terrorists, and Donald Trump said that we're in an armed conflict. They are not actually attacking us. And no, drug overdoses don't count. That'd be like saying that gun manufacturers are a terrorist organization because guns get used to shoot people. Which maybe that's not a bad idea. So just some questions to really consider. And I think that we need to really think about these things and not just jump up with our R or our D and, make proclamations. Is the clearly illegal the first thing, is it clearly illegal? How can service members determine if orders are manifestly unlawful when senior lawyers have been fired and legal counsel is absent? Like, can we at least give them a way to like talk to people that are objective and actually know the law? Like, so many people are just, I get my comments in my Twitter feed of just people that are, well, they're smugglers. And it's like, I don't care if they're smugglers. You don't get to murder people because you think they're smugglers. It's still murder. They might be bad people. I'm not saying that I'm vouching for the personal character of every single person, but you don't have to be a good person to not be murdered. You don't just get to murder people and say, but they were bad people. Political versus legal judgment. And when president says operations are lawful, but the UN and international experts disagree, whose judgment matters to Constitution-bound troops? Does the president saying they're a terrorist group make them a terrorist group? Does it make them a terrorist group legally? Does it make them a terrorist group morally? Is the person that's killing the other person, is he morally justified because the president said he's a terrorist, even though he was just actually a fisherman out trying to get some tuna? Which, by all accounts, there are some that were literally just fishermen out fishing for the day. One of them had 6 children that will never see their father again. There are legitimately and statistically innocent people who have been killed through these operations. And the Thompson precedent, they know that they are in for a world of hurt if they refuse. And I just cannot get over, if you are in that position and you either destroy the rest of your own life or you murder somebody, why should anybody be put in a position to make that choice? The people that are evil, the people that are corrupt, are the people that are forcing that choice upon them. The ones that are giving that order are far worse people than the smugglers that they're accusing. And that doesn't mean the smugglers are good people. But these guys, Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, that are ordering the execution of people without due process, those are the evil ones. And yeah, it is evil. Can the president unilaterally declare armed conflict against drug cartels to bypass legal restrictions? What are the limits? Like, what is the limit? If you're defending this, what is Donald Trump's limit? And will the next Democratic president have the same limits? Because it's not just the actions of this, it's the actions of everyone that follows. The precedent matters too. So, where's Congress? Congress refused to even reject the thing. These sycophants in Congress that refused to follow the law. At least, like, I cannot believe it, but I am defending Marjorie Taylor Greene and Rand Paul in the same episode. But at least Rand Paul, he threw a fit that Barack Obama bombed the one citizen that was actually a terrorist. He was upset about that. At least he's upset about this too. At least he's consistent. These other 50 or 51 senators that didn't put a stop to it and just take back what is a congressional power is just appalling. Trump threatening lawmakers. He's like, fired lawmakers or threatening lawmakers. I'm sorry, not lawyers, lawmakers. Anyone that doesn't do it, or sorry, he's threatening the Democrats that made this video. He's calling them sedition, saying that they are punishable by death. They didn't even break a law. They didn't commit sedition. They said something true. It is U.S. law that U.S. military cannot obey an unlawful order. And I love the double standard here. They're like, well, what law did he give that was unlawful? Like, why don't they specify which law? And then on the other hand, you want to say that by saying you can't obey an unlawful order, they meant every law, every order. Every order is unlawful now because they didn't say which one. So it's like, on the one hand, they need specificity from the Democrats, but then they're generalizing when it comes to what they, said was unlawful. You can't have it both ways. But I'll tell you what's an unlawful order: telling somebody to kill civilians. And that is what is happening. And people are being fired for disagreeing with that. And if it was an airman or a soldier or, a private, they would be in the brig. No evidence standards. There's no evidence provided that the targets were terrorists. Still no evidence. There were 2 survivors. One was from Ecuador and one was from Colombia. The military, the Navy, rescued both of the civilians. Didn't take them back to be tried. They could have. If they had evidence that these were drug smugglers, why didn't they bring them back to be tried? They brought them to Ecuador and they brought them to Colombia. Neither country prosecuted. They said they didn't have any evidence. Now, you can say, well, that's because the evidence all got blown up. Well, had to leave from somewhere, right? The boat had to leave from somewhere. You don't need the cocaine to prove the case. All you need is the people. But they were both let go within a week because there's no evidence. And there's also the fact that they were blown up in international waters, so the crime wasn't being committed in the countries where they were at, which is another reason that it's better to just wait until they got here, if this is where they were coming, and arrest them. Only in one of the strikes have they found any cocaine. They keep talking about fentanyl, but fentanyl doesn't come from there. The stuff that makes fentanyl comes from China and goes to Mexico. No reason for that to be out on the water. So there's this really kind of just generalization now where anybody that's brown is a smuggler. Anybody that's a smuggler deserves to die. Like, brown people deserve to die. I even had one guy on Twitter. Now, I'm not saying this represents all of them, but he was like saying, yeah, well, they're illegal aliens, so I don't care what happens to them. They're not even in America, dude. But now it's just like illegals, which is, by the way, an adjective, not a noun. Like, let's stop using the word illegal as a noun. If you want to use it as a noun, call Donald Trump an illegal. He's actually committed felonies. But they've kind of just made anybody that's brown is a illegal alien. Everybody that is an illegal alien is like the most morally corrupt person on earth and deserves to die. The way that they talk about brown people is just disturbing. It's like, what went wrong with your soul that you could hate the entire southern continent that much? So, international standing. Allies condemn strikes. UN says illegal. Does continuing damage America's moral authority and international relations? Do you think that we're hurting our international image here? Like, we went from being the world leader to now we're Putin. We're no better than Russia. We're taking Russia's side. Key takeaways. The legal duty to disobey is real but narrow, and it's real difficult. Service members must disobey manifestly unlawful orders, but the standard is high. Orders must be obviously illegal, not merely questionable. And even if they are obviously illegal, you can still have the rest of your life destroyed by not following them. Just ask Hugh Thompson. Following orders is not a defense, wasn't a defense at Nuremberg, wasn't a defense at My Lai. Receiving an order doesn't absolve you of responsibility for war crimes. So why are we putting these poor young drone operators in this position where they have to choose between taking somebody else's life or destroying their own? Personal cost can be enormous. Hugh Thompson showed moral courage and was vilified for decades. Service members who refuse orders risk careers, reputations, and personal safety. And I have nothing but disdain for anybody that puts them in this position. I am not going to make this about them. I'm going to make it about the people that are putting them in the position. Caribbean strikes occupy gray zone. Unlike My Lai, clearly illegal, Caribbean strikes have DOJ legal opinion and presidential authorization, but face serious international challenges. And I would say also that the legal authorization from the US is highly questionable. Like, it all just distills down to it's okay to murder people if Trump says so. Would it be okay to murder people if Biden said so? Like, think of the next president. What Pete Buttigieg, if he decides that he's going to make MAGA a terrorist organization, are you okay with that? Are you okay with the president just being able to designate anybody he wants a terrorist organization, then saying that they're, can't think of my brain dropped the word, but like they're violent actors or whatever. And so therefore it's okay to kill anybody that's MAGA or suspected of being MAGA. Well, he was in a car with MAGAs. Like, this is what Trump has done. If you are on a fishing boat in the Caribbean and you're from certain countries, like South America, then he can just blast you. They were cartel members. Yeah, I don't know who they are, but they were cartel members. Don't have to supply any evidence. It's classified. So then we got somebody screaming, if not here in America, go back to your own country and do it right. Yeah, see, like what I'm saying, like these people aren't in America. They're in international waters. They are literally not in any country in the world. They are in international waters. So why are you talking about go back to your own country? Like this kind of anger and hostility to people that just happen to be brown. So I got EPSIC. You can hurt because you can get hurt by mom, but when dad. I don't know what that was referring to. I don't know what wasn't true. And I don't know what I'm not supposed to do. 16 different countries and the UN have condemned it as war crimes. I mean, it's a violation of international law. And again, I don't know if I mentioned this. There's an agreement, an international agreement, that drug cartels are criminal organizations. And there is a whole series of laws which govern that. None of them make them terrorists. It does not have to be this kind of dichotomy of either they're terrorists or they're good people. There are different kinds of bad people that are not terrorists. Most bad people are not terrorists. That's why we have due process. so that we can convict people that are guilty. And we should just like arrest the people that are on these boats, confiscate the drugs, flip them, get their bosses, and so on, like we have always done. We don't have to just start murdering people on the high seas because Trump said so, which is, again, their entire legal argument distills down to because Trump said so. It's just, we're in a armed conflict. Why? Because Trump said so. We weren't. Did any cartels attack us? And no, smuggling cocaine is not an attack. The attacks have to be kinetic. They have to be like a physical attack, and they have to be immediate, and they have to cause immediate and predictable death. A bomb is a terrorist attack. A shooting is a terrorist attack. A truck driving through a crowd is a terrorist attack. Smuggling drugs into the country is just dope dealing and drug running, and it's illegal and it's wrong, but it's not terrorism. So stop with the false dichotomies. All right, so new comments. Fentanyl is a terrorist. No, fentanyl is not a terrorist attack. It's not. Like, you get these TV shows where like somebody like came within like 15 minutes of breathing in fentanyl and they're being rushed to the emergency. Fentanyl is not like what they tell you it is on TV. Oh, well, somebody was smuggling in fentanyl and they, it was enough to kill everybody in the world 500 times. Like, settle down. Yes, there are, I think last year, there are like 88,000 people that died of overdose, and that includes all kinds of drugs, not just fentanyl. Fentanyl is the predominant one, and we need to do things to stop fentanyl overdose. Blowing up ships is not stopping any fentanyl at all. Like, not one fentanyl overdose has been prevented by blowing up all these ships combined. Because none of them had any of the material they make fentanyl for. That all comes from China to Mexico. Then it gets smuggled over the border by Americans. 90% of the fentanyl seized at the border was being smuggled by Americans. It's like this. This is just weird. It is a bioterrorist move. No, it's not. Like, this is just weird. You people are weird. Tim Walz had it right. You're just weird. It's not a bioterrorist movement. It's people trying to make money off of selling drugs. So, anyway, that's enough letting the weirdos in. That's it for today. Thanks for joining the show. Hopefully, if you watched the whole thing, you learned something. I'm guessing some people didn't, but that's okay. Have a good day. I'll talk to you tomorrow.